All right. All right. Welcome, welcome. So thank you for joining me. I would love for you to put in the chat here where you're joining from, just so that I get an idea of where you're joining from. That would be really cool. I'm here in the United States, just in case you're not joining from the United States. Um, so thank you for joining me. All right. Let's see here. Who do we have? Hi, I'm not sure if I can pronounce your name correctly. Is it Thais? Hopefully, I pronounced that correctly. Thank you for joining me. And Michelle, thank you for joining me today. We're going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead and type in the chat where you are joining from. That would be awesome. I'd love to know. Um, that would be cool. And if you can't, if you're driving, then let's be safe, okay? All right, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining me here today. I want to welcome you to this. Oh, I pronounced it correct. Thank you so much. Awesome, awesome. Yay. All right, all right. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to the call today. We're going to be talking about lead generation strategies for podcasters. Go ahead and type in the chat if you are currently a podcaster, type yes. If you're not a podcaster, then just type no. That would be great to know. All right. And we're going to go ahead and I want to share a little bit about who I am, just in case you have no idea who this person is. My name is Aldreama Harper, and I am a certified organizational specialist, business organizing strategist, and declutter coach. And I'm also the creator of Declutter with Dream virtual events, where I help entrepreneurs, solopreneurs to get organized. And so I also have a podcast called um, the Organizedpreneur podcast. So a little bit about my background here. I started my business back in 2003 as a professional organizer. And I've taken a few pivots every now and then when I've needed to pivot based on maybe the economy, based on what's trending and things like that. And I would go out to my clients' homes and offices and help them get organized. Love organizing. I love doing that, and I continue to do that. However, I do it virtually now. There are occasions where I will go to a client's office because I specialize in home offices, but there are occasions where I will go to a client's office if it was a referral, or if it was, a specific case. So I do it on an as needed basis. So I still will go to them now, but primarily what I do is I do everything virtually. So I do my decluttering sessions virtually. I walk people through their decluttering challenges and getting organized. I do all of that virtually now, and I absolutely love it. And so I never really um, moved away from, that particular passion. And so as you see here on the screen, this is the Declutter with Dream, is where I help people get organized. I do 5-day challenges and things like that. And again, I also have a podcast. So a podcast called the Organizedpreneur Podcast. And so in order to supplement things that I do with my clients as far as organizing, that's what the podcast is for. And so it really is a way that I can supplement. And what I mean by supplement, as an additional way of providing value and content for clients, the podcast does that. So, all right, so let's get into it. Let's get into it here. Okay. All right. So what I currently do is I help female entrepreneurs ignite the business of their dream. And so, again, I want to thank you for joining me. So let's get into lead generation strategies for generating leads for your podcast. I had asked earlier before some of you came on, if you already have a podcast, put yes in the comments. If you haven't started yet, just put no. I just would really like to know where you are in your podcasting journeys. So, podcasting listenership has actually grown since 2015 by 129%, and it continues to grow. I don't know about you, but I listen to podcasts on a regular basis. I listen to them because I want to learn something, or something may be in my genre or my interest or what have you. I love podcasts, and I also love to do podcasts. So, but listenership has grown by 129%. Podcasting is also a very, very powerful tool for your business growth, right? As I mentioned a few minutes ago, maybe some of you didn't hear me, but I use it to supplement and add additional value to my clients through podcasting. And so it fuels business growth. It fuels your business growth. And so a lot of people don't realize that you can use podcasts for lead generation. And in addition to that, conversion and client acquisition and retention should be also a part of your strategy. So lead generation through podcasting helps to supplement that, right? And so you'll get a little bit more of what I mean in just a minute. But lead generation, conversion, client acquisition, and retention should always be a part of your business model. And so podcasting does help in that arena. So I wanted to just kind of knock out some myths that people have about podcasts. So, and let me know in the comments if you've ever heard some of these things about podcasting. Okay, so here we go. Listeners and downloads equal income. Listeners and download equals income. You hear a lot of times people talk about, oh, I got 30,000 downloads, or I have 100 million listeners, or whatever that number is. It doesn't always equal income. Okay, you can generate income with a podcast with a small email list, right? Depending on how you position everything. Okay, so listeners and downloads do not always equal income. Podcasting is oversaturated. Oversaturated. Nope, it's not. It is not oversaturated. There is still a lot of research and statistics that says, it's not an oversaturated thing. So podcasting is still viable. If it was not still viable, then YouTube would not have its own podcasting channel exclusively for podcasting. I don't know if you all knew that or not, but yeah. So podcasting is not oversaturated. Podcasting requires expensive equipment and technical expertise. Nope, it does not. You can start a podcast with your phone, with some earbuds, and an internet connection. You don't even need your internet connection, because if you got good data, a good data program, or data with your phone, then you may not even need the internet. But you don't need expensive equipment and technical expertise. That's what I'm saying. Another myth, you need a large audience. Well, I just said that a few minutes ago. You don't have to have a large audience. What you need is an engaged audience, right? And that could be, you can do that in a lot of different ways. Here's a myth. If I launch it, they will come. Nope. That is a myth. And it's one of the things that I thought was going to happen when I launched my podcast years ago. And It's real funny the reason that I launched my podcast, and I say it's funny, but the reason I launched my podcast was because as a young girl, I always wanted to, one of my dreams, one of my aspirations was to be a radio announcer. And I was told that as I got older, I remember having this conversation with someone who had a radio broadcast. And they invited me. They were like, "Hey, you think you got a great voice? I think you would be good for radio broadcasting." So that always stuck with me. And I was like, "Oh, okay," but I never did it, you know. But when podcasting started to evolve, that desire and that aspiration was still there. Okay. And so, but what I didn't realize was if I launched the podcast, they did not come. And so you got to do this. You got to have a purpose, in launching your podcast. There has to be a reason. You have to want to provide value and make an impact. And so when I initially launched my podcast, which was really back in, I want to say it was like maybe like 2007, 8, or 9, or something like that. I don't even remember. I really didn't have a lot of listeners because I didn't I didn't look at it as a part of my business strategy. Hopefully that makes sense. So no, if they launch it, they will not come. You got to have a strategy behind it, okay? So just like your business, you got to have intentionality behind launching a podcast. You got to make sure that you do certain things for your podcast, just like you would do any other business, right? Because you got to look at it as a part of your business model. So you want to make sure that you identify your target audience and niche. I didn't do that when I first did my podcast, years ago. I didn't do that. Like I said, I just like podcasting, it was an aspiration for me. And so I never did identify my target niche, my target audience and niche, but I knew what my topic was. My topic was always about organizing. It was always about productivity, time management. It always had something to do with business, and it always had something to do with that specific genre. But I didn't understand the whole aspect of identifying your audience and your niche. But just like, in business, you have to deploy the same type of strategies for your podcast as you do your business. And so you do that by conducting market research, right? And so when I say conducting market research, it does not have to be anything that's overly complicated. Okay. One of the things that I do when it comes to market research, when I'm trying to look at things specific to the people that I want to reach, one of the things that I do is if I see an ad that is specifically geared toward my audience, I will look at the comments. I will look at what they're saying. I will look at what they're saying so that I can identify their language, some of their pain points. What are the things that's really keeping them up, at night? So it doesn't have to be something overly complicated. You can conduct market research by, simply doing things like that, or perhaps being in a Facebook group or a community of some sort that perhaps may have the potential clients that you want to serve. And you can conduct market research that way. You can conduct market research by creating a post on your profile that asks certain questions. So again, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. The thing you want to do is engage with your audience. Engage with your audience. And how do you do that? Well, you do that, excuse me, let me go back. So you do that by again, looking at, comments is one of the ways that you can do that. You can do that by creating content that gets them talking about the topic that you are specifically want to target them for, right? I know that didn't even really make sense, but I think you might kind of get it. So anyway, but you want to engage with your audience, whether it's Facebook groups or in or on your posts, or maybe you have your own community. You want to engage with your audience on the different social media platforms. As we know, social media is an intricate part of our business model, and we should be engaging with our audience there, right? And from there, you can create an audience persona, okay? An audience persona. You really want to, in identifying your niche and your audience, you really want to identify, again, what are their pain points? Where are they hanging out? What are some of the things that they are looking for? What are what is their language, right? There's so many ways that you can create the audience persona by just doing the market research, like I said, and it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but it is necessary in order to speak to the people that you want to speak to. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's see. Type in the comments if that makes sense. So number 2, you want to craft compelling content. And one of the ways you do that is by storytelling. So when some of you came on, I was sharing my story in terms of how I got started in podcasting. It was an aspiration for me, right? And so some of you may connect with that, right? But you want to make sure that you engage with your audience and create compelling content by storytelling. That's how you connect with people. Not only that, you want to mix up the formats and styles in terms of your podcast. So there's different types of podcasts. There's interview podcasts, there's solo podcasts, there's podcasts for entertainment, there's sports podcasts, there's news podcasts, there's educational podcasts. There's all types of podcasts that's available out there. And you just have to figure out what genre you want to be a part of. But you can also kind of mix it up. And one of the things that I do on my Organizedpreneur podcast is I will mix it up. So like season 1, I did interview podcast. In season 2, I did solo podcast. Now season 3, I went back to some interview podcasts, or I may have switched them, back and forth. But my point is, you want to kind of mix up the formats and the styles to kind of make it interesting. And sometimes, you may, when you're mixing it up, you may just kind of really hit that sweet spot in terms of what is making your content and your podcast pop, right? The reason that I did, kind of mixed it up a little bit is because I was still trying to find and figure out what I enjoy doing. Because the last thing you want to do is create a podcast and launch a podcast, and you don't even like doing it. Now, I will say this too. So one of the things that I did in my interview podcast, and that was the reason why I was kind of mixed up in my head, but one of the things that I did in my interview podcast, initially, I was interviewing anybody that wanted to be on my podcast, right? And because one of the things that people were saying is like, do the interview podcast, that way you can tap into other people's audiences and things like that. And, so I was doing an interview podcast. Well, that is okay, but you got to be even more strategic than that, because what I discovered when I did that was that they were not really sharing it with their audience. And that was really all I asked them to do. The interview podcast was designed to I was, speaking to aspiring women entrepreneurs. And so I asked them to share with their email list and on social media. And very few of them did that. So, and it could be maybe it was too much work. I don't know. Maybe they didn't see the value. I'm not sure. However, you want to be very, very strategic when you do those type of podcasts when it comes to interview podcasts. So what I did was I switched it. And so now in my interview podcast, I interview clients and I interview people who have gone through my decluttering challenge. So they have to have some type of experience with me. That makes it more valuable for me, and it makes it valuable for the person that I'm interviewing because I'm helping them to get a little bit more, a few more eyeballs on their social media. So when they're launching their businesses, because what happened in the last decluttering challenge, people who went through through the decluttering challenge, they launched their businesses. So I wanted to interview them to find out, okay, what was it that caused you to want to launch your business, right? So in doing so, there was value for me and value for them. And as a matter of fact, one of my clients, she went through the decluttering challenge. And as a result of us doing an interview podcast and we posted it on social media, she got more clients. So there's value there. And so my point is you do want to mix it up a little bit just to kind of figure out that sweet spot. So now let's move to marketing tactics. Marketing tactics. So with marketing tactics, the thing that you want to keep in mind is this is not an all-inclusive. These are not all-inclusive strategies. There are many things that work, but when you are consistent and when you are, making sure that you're monitoring the results, then you will figure out whether or not it's working. So these that I'm going to share with you now are some that I have tried and seem to really be working for a lot of others that I see, as well as myself. So one is optimizing your podcast metadata. And metadata, all that is the data that you use in your title, your description, and your keywords. When I first started out, I was like, I don't even know what they're talking about. Right? But this is how people will find your podcast based on the description. And just like when you all may go to a podcast platform, Apple or Google or whatever, and perhaps you're searching for a specific topic, then you're going to put in the search what it is you're looking for. Particularly if you don't know the name of the person, you may only know the topic that you want to find a podcast on. So the title of the podcast, description, and the keywords really help to optimize your podcast. Cross promotion and collaborations. So I shared with you just a minute ago about, an example of collaborations. So now I'm more strategic about my cross promotion and collaboration efforts because again, people have different agendas. And so there has to be value for them and there has to be value for you, right? If you're going to deploy that type of effort, right? So cross promotion means that let's just say someone that that has maybe they have the same audience, but the way you do things are, your services are still different. Maybe you and someone else, you both service coaches and consultants, but your services are different. Then you can do cross promotion, you can do collaborations, but again, just be strategic about how you do it and make sure that it's something that complements your business and your goals, as well as something that um, you want it to be complementary, but you also want it to align with where you're trying to go. It's got to be an alignment there, right? So that is, cross promotion and collaboration. When I did it before, there was, there was a couple of times I was like, okay, and there were even people that wanted to. Well, actually, here's the thing. I just got an email today, actually, of someone wanting to be on my podcast. It was someone, I think it's a VA that's actually promoting their client and wanting their client to get guest appearances on podcasts. Well, I looked at it, and I'm I'm still kind of thinking about whether or not I want to interview them on my podcast, mainly because it's not quite the alignment that I want. She's never experienced me, right? She's not gone through my decluttering challenge. She's not experienced me. So those are the people that I want to interview. So all I'm saying is that make sure that you are being very strategic and intentional about your cross promotions and your collaborations. Let's talk a little bit about monetizing podcasts to generate leads. So one thing that I absolutely love, so most of you probably have heard of Anchor, right? So Anchor, it's a free platform where you can launch your podcast on. But one of the things that they do is, so number one, they're owned by Spotify. Okay, so that right there gives it a whole lot of clout, right? A lot of people are on Spotify. But the other thing that they do is they allow you to create a membership within a paid membership within the platform. All you have to do is like connect your Stripe account, and that way you have private content, right, that people are actually paying for. So you have premium content and memberships that people will actually pay for. So that's one way that you can actually monetize your podcast, through premium content and memberships. Another thing that I have done is that, and I know Maz is on here. Thank you, Maz, for joining. But I do a weekly networking event. And so during one of the 12-week series, I had opened up a membership for, because I was talking about my book, right? And so what I did was I created a membership for that, where people had access to the private podcasts. Okay. And so you can do that and make money. And that's how you can monetize. Monetize is really all about, revenue. Okay. That's what it's about, revenue. And so, but those are two ways that you can do that. Maybe you have written a book and you want to supplement it with an audio podcast or video podcast. I happen to love audio, but it just depends on, how you want to do it. Okay. So that's a great way to monetize your podcast. Event marketing is another way to monetize your podcast. What I just mentioned, I have a business partner, and she and I host weekly networking events. We've been doing it past almost 4 years now. It's like 3.5, maybe 4 years now. And so that's how we get exposure and are and get discovered. And so that's also an opportunity to tell people about a podcast, is through event marketing. I'm telling you, it really, really works. Event marketing generates a higher return on your investment of time, energy, what have you. So consider event marketing as a way to promote your podcast. One of the things that I also did was, when I launched one season of my podcast, I actually creating an event around the launch, right? And people came. They, I was just, it was my first, it wasn't like back when I didn't know what I was doing, right? But it was when I started to be more intentional about my podcast. I hosted an event around the launch, just like you would do a book launch or a business launch or anything else. So consider doing that. Hosting events, your own events, allows you to create a unique and immersive experience for your audience, fostering stronger connections, just like this event right here, right? Hopefully, I'm leaving a good, positive, lasting impact. But hosting your events will create that type of experience for your audience. So consider that. I do 5-day challenges, right? I just mentioned, for those of you who may not have heard, I do 5-day decluttering challenges. And so I was doing those decluttering challenges once a month. Well, I started doing them once a quarter. I have one that's going to be coming up in August. I believe it's August 7th. And so specifically designed to the target market that I want to reach, which are female solo entrepreneurs, whether it's, a service based, whether you are a coach or consultant or what have you. That's what my 5-day challenges, my 5-day decluttering challenges are for. They help you to declutter your life and your business. And so it's a shameless plug, isn't it? But hosting 5-day challenges, let me tell you something. 5-day challenges, when I hosted the 5-day challenge, I launched it in I think it might have been December or October of last year, and I did it consistently every month for 6 months. Let me tell you something, they work. That's why you see so many people doing 5-day challenges, because they work, right? And so it generates leads, it increases conversion, it cultivates long-term customer loyalty. And so doing those type of things around your podcast and introducing your podcast, not even as a supplement to the training that you provide, that's how you generate leads around your podcast. It captivates your audience attention. It's a transformative journey. They get a sense of achievement and satisfaction when you do 5-day challenges. And I say that because events to support your podcasting endeavors, I believe, is really the way to go. Okay. So that's why I'm driving that home. Community. So a lot of times people don't understand the value of community, whether it's a Facebook community or, like I said, we have our networking events. And so we have created a community around the people that we want to serve, right? And so it's always a great opportunity to talk about what you're doing, whether you've launched a podcast, you get listeners and things like that. So you have a community. I know one person, well, I know a lot of people that do this, but most of the time when you see the 5-day challenges, there's always a community around that. Okay. So that's another way, because as I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of people, they want to be a part of community, right? So, and again, that's one of the things that I've done. I actually create a community whenever I have a 5-day challenge. And so it's a community. Also, there are subsequent podcasts that support that, right? So, and that's honestly what I am seeing in the marketplace right now. Another idea, hopefully I'm not overwhelming you with ideas, and hopefully you're able to, really grasp the power of doing podcasts as a lead magnet, or you create a lead magnet and you supplement it with a podcast, a private podcast or a public podcast. I had created a PDF that shows people how to start up their podcast, right? But in addition to that, there's an audio training that supports that um, that PDF, right? So you want to deploy lead magnets. You want to have some type of irresistible lead magnet, uh, because it's like a magnetic force that attracts your ideal client effortlessly. I can't seem to get that out today. Drawing them to your world and your value and expertise, right? So you can start out by just creating some type of a cheat sheet. That's one of the things that I did for my decluttering challenge. I created a cheat sheet that led people to download the cheat sheet, and so now they're on my email list, right? So as a result of that, I'm able to engage with them via email. It really, really does work. The conversion rate of lead magnets are 2 to 5 times more than your average uh, typical thing that you may offer, right? Webinars, uh, that you may offer. Your lead magnet actually has a 2 to 5 times higher rate conversion rate than the other things that you may be trying to deploy out there. Okay. They're highly effective for engaging, your audience, and there's a 20% increase of customer retention as a result of a lead magnet. And your lead magnet doesn't have to be a PDF. It could be anything. Your lead magnet can be your lead magnet can be your 5-day challenge, so I really want you to kind of open up your minds around, the power of podcasting. And it may sound like I'm getting away from podcasting, but I'm not, because if you use it strategically, you can deploy these types of strategies to support your podcast, because people that, like I said, with some of the myths, if you just launch a podcast with no direction, no purpose, no nothing, they're just not going to automatically come. They need to see you. They need to, engage with your content, right? So whenever you think about podcasting, I want you to think about, how can I do this on a level that creates more engagement for my podcast, rather than just launching a podcast and hoping people will come, right? So I want to open up to see if people have any type of any questions around this, around podcasting. I'll look at some of the comments and things like that. Today, there's nothing for sale today. The only thing that, as a call to action, is that if you're wanting to know a little bit more about how you can do